Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time, to Diary of an Olympic Triathlete. I don't even know what week it is at this point. It'll be in the title, but yeah, we are quite a ways into this Diary of an Olympic Triathlete. I think week 17, 18, 19 around there. And this is also a multi-week episode because if you guys have been following closely the series, you may have noticed that I haven't uploaded videos the last couple of weeks. Um, and that's because I was traveling. I was off in Alaska with my family. So as a result, I wasn't too focused on my running and my fitness stuff, and so therefore I didn't like make time to make a video. So it is what it is. Here we are. I'm gonna give you guys the updates on all that has happened in the past couple of weeks, and also what things are looking like in the coming weeks with my fitness and all that stuff. I will say I actually plan on uploading a different video as this Diary of an Olympic Triathlete, which is that when I was in Alaska in Barrow, I did a run there, a long run, which I'll talk about a little bit later because it's important for other reasons. But one thing I wanted to do on that run was record a video to be basically a diary of an Olympic triathlete where you guys would accompany me on the run and I would explain what was happening and all that. And I did that. I recorded the video and I actually uploaded it very briefly to the channel, but I took it down because I watched it back and I realized that the video was really not very enjoyable to watch because it was me talking while I was running. And I realized that my manner of talking is pretty scattered. I think you guys may have noticed that in some of these videos, but it became even more so when I was running. Like I just very quickly would, change my train of thought, like lose my train of thought and start going with a different topic. It just happened a lot. It was very disorganized. And then also the further I got into the run, obviously I was doing an easy run, but you still start to get out of breath. Um, and I think it affects me more than it affects some people. Like I'm going at what feels like an easy rate of exertion for me, but still, I think I physically present a bit more of like my voice sounded not great. It sounded pretty like just like out of breath. I was either like whispering or like just raggedly talking by the end of the video. So it just was not very enjoyable, I think, as a viewer experience. And I also think like it was, I didn't record the whole run. I recorded maybe about 40 minutes of it. And that was the part where I was talking. So it's a 40-minute video, and very little of it was actually dedicated to my fitness updates. A lot of it was just me kind of rambling about different things. Um, so anyway, I figured it'd be better to have a video of me sitting down and give you guys, the well-told version of the events of what has occurred. So what has occurred? Well, let's see. The last time I left you guys, I was tapering for the Liberty Mile, or America's Mile is the official name, but we call it the Liberty Mile because historically that was its name. Um, anyway, the Liberty Mile or America's Mile here in Pittsburgh, which was on July 12th, and that was me attempting the 6 minute mile. That was my big moment of I wanted to get out there and attempt the 6 minute mile. I'd been preparing for months. I've been working up my fitness. I'd been, doing interval workouts. I'd done some really serious interval workouts leading up to it. But I was going into the race, I would definitely say, not in the best mindset. First off, there was a lot of pressure because I kind of had this idea that, oh, I'm about to go to Alaska, which I went to Alaska for, 2 weeks. That's going to disrupt my training. And then I won't have time, throughout the rest of the summer to retrain, get back to my peak, and be able to peak to do another attempt. So basically, this is my last attempt that I can like really feasibly get a 6 minute mile. That's what I thought. So I was putting pressure on myself. And then also on Monday, the race was on Friday. On Monday, I had done a workout that was an 8x4 at 6 minute mile pace with a 130 rest. And that workout was meant to predict if I could do that pace for a mile or not. That's to say, if I could complete 8 400 laps, so 8 laps around the track with a short rest at my mile pace, then in theory, I should be able to run the mile at that pace as well. What happened during that workout? I did not succeed. I talked about this in the video before when I was still tapering for the race, but it just did not go well. The workout, it started okay. But it felt really hard even from the beginning, and the rest was just not long enough. I went anaerobic very quickly, so once I was doing like reps 4 and 5, and again this was a workout of 8 reps. I'm in 4 and 5, and I would finish and just be like just gasping, just trying to get air in. Like clearly I was not working aerobically enough because there was just no air. Um, and so we ended up having to lengthen the rest to 2 minutes, which we had done workouts previously with 2 minute rests at that pace. So we lengthened it to 2 minutes, and that made it just manageable enough. But of course, that meant we weren't doing what the workout was. And then on the final rep, I wanted to be ambitious. I was like, all right, this one, let's do a 130 rest. So we did it. And then I went out for the final lap, and I was like, all right, one lap, we just got to push through. I just could not. I did 200 of the 400, and the entire time I was closing my eyes, just like trying to work through the pain. I'm not a mantra person. I think mantras are a little cheesy, but just to that mind, I was in my head just drilling the mantra of keep the pace, keep the pace, keep the pace. That's kind of like I just came up with it on the spot and was just trying to stick with that. But I just got to the 100 and to the 200 mark, and just the combination of I was just so exhausted mentally. I was just like, I can't do this. My body was just not managing it, and so I just slowed down. I remember I slowed down to basically a jog, and then I just collapsed onto my hands and knees next to the track because my body was basically like, you need to stop now. So I did 7.5 reps of 8 of that workout, which looking back on it, that's good. That is, I did pretty much the entire workout, granted with slightly more rest than I was supposed to. But on top of that, it was a hot day. It was a hard workout, but I don't know, that workout just zapped my confidence, because that's supposed to be a predictor workout. If you can do that workout, you can do the race at that pace. But I couldn't do the workout, so then I just started thinking, I'm like, okay, well, I can't run this pace of the race. The 6 minute mile is off the table. But I did start strategizing. I was like, because as a runner, I am someone who I can run quite fast at the end of a race with a final sprint. That's the people when I beat people, it's usually with a final sprint at the end. Like if they're aerobically better than me, I beat people in two ways. Either they haven't paced themselves well, and I have, so I pass them, later in the race when they gas out, or I get to the end, and of course people are gassed, and people usually aren't sprinting very well, and I always have that sprint that just like I have 100 meter burst, or if I really saved a little bit extra, I have 200 meters that I can really speed up and blow by people like my finishing kick. So my thought was this, that I can bank a lot of time with a finishing kick in a race. So let me go out a bit slower. I'm gonna go like I'd done a workout a few weeks prior that was 130 rest, and I'd done the reps at maybe 135, a little bit quicker, because that had been the workout, had been to go at 135. So that's 620 pace. So my theory was this: if I go at 620 pace, so I do 135, 135, 135, which I know I'm capable of, and I get to that final lap, I can then do my sprint finish. That's gonna bank me 15 seconds on the time, because if I need to run at 130 to be on pace, if I run a 115, that will give me 15 seconds, which means I can get across the line. That was my theory. My theory was actually run a bit faster, run like 133. So that way I needed to bank 9 seconds, and then with a final sprint, make up those 9 seconds that I'd lost in the first laps. But like the idea was purposefully run under pace, like slower than my pace, so that I would be able to do it aerobically and actually finish the mile and be somewhat strong so that I would have that sprint. But even so, like even with that strategy in mind, I just didn't feel confident. So that was racking me during the week, and then I don't know what happened. Like I was tapering. It wasn't a long taper. It was from Monday was my last hard workout, and Friday was the race. So I had 3 days of resting, light running, and so one of those light runs was on. Well, Tuesday I took off. Wednesday I did my long run, but I did a tapered version. So I did a 3.5 mile long run, which I've actually figured out that it probably should have been shorter, because a taper means go at like 50% of your regular volume, more or less. And my long run at that point was like 5.5 miles, 6 miles. So I mean, I did 3.5. And I didn't think anything of it. I did the 3.5 mile run. It was a good run. I get home and I don't know. I just noticed like a kind of soreness in my calf, but that's pretty normal. Like I didn't think anything about it because I have runs. You have a little soreness here and there. I stretched out. I did my foam rolling. Took my shower. Whatever. Next day, I go to do my shakeout run, and I noticed my calf was still sore when I was warming up and as I was doing it. It wasn't bad, but it was sore. And I did my strides, whatever. But I was like, okay, interesting. So I get there for the race on Friday, and as I was warming up, noticed that calf soreness was still there, and it was more present than it had been. So like in my effort to taper for the run, somehow that 3.5 mile run gave me this calf soreness, and it wasn't able to heal. Even though I was tapering, I was resting, I was sleeping well, I was taking time. It just it just didn't do the job. So I got there um, on Friday, and it was a night race, which that meant that I was mentally just going through it the whole day. Like I was just nervous. Like every time I thought about the race, I just got nervous. I was kind of making a mountain out of a molehill. I'd forgotten that a mile is a very short distance. Um, and it had been about a month since I'd run a mile. So I was just thinking of, oh, how long, how painful. Like I forgot that I've run a 5K, which is 3 times that distance, not too long ago. But I don't know, just having that hard workout on Monday just mentally threw me off my game. I was also just having other things that I was going through personally, just like mentally. I was in a weird place and not a great place. So I was not in the position to do my best running. And then on top of that, we were doing the warm up lap, and so the registration of the race the uh, was at the finish line. So we got our shirts, we got our bibs and whatever, and then we decided to do our warm up mile jogging back to the start line. So that way we get to the start line, do strides, and we'd be ready to start. So what happened? We're jogging down. We get to the end of our warm up jog, and what happens? We see a hill. We see this slight downhill, not a long downhill, but maybe about 70, 80 meters, all right, of downhill, which we knew that coming the other way. So as we're racing, is going to be an uphill. And in that moment, I was just like, what just happened? Like this changes everything because listen, hills are a thing that you have in races. That's not a problem. But in a race as short as a mile, every second is important. A hill like the one that was there, which it was not a steep gradient. It was like about this, but just that for, 15, 20 seconds of the race, which is what it would have been, or, even less than that, that adds an extra 4, 3, 4, 5 seconds, depending on the kind of runner you are. And that can be the difference between a sub 6 mile and a not sub 6 mile. And the second I saw that hill, I was like, it's done. There's no way because I'm already looking at squeaking in under this time, and with a hill in the way, this just can't happen. And I was just like mad. Like I was like, why did the organizers do it like this? Because I knew why they had picked that course. They picked that course because it finished right at the football stadium in the center of Pittsburgh, which is like a big, it's a big deal. It passed by the baseball stadium too. So like it was a nice course. It passed a lot of important landmarks in Pittsburgh. The people organizing it were like, or one of the major sponsors was like the Visit Pittsburgh, like the tourism people. So um, obviously they picked it based on the scenery, but what that meant was that the course was not completely flat. And when I had run all my other miles, they had been flat and on tracks, and in 2 of the 3, I'd had spikes on. And so each race, of course, I'd improved on the race prior to it. In this race, I was still looking to do that. Like I came in with 3 goals, which goal 1, sub 6 mile. Goal 2, enjoy race day, have a good time. It's a big event. It's an event that I remember being cool, but I hadn't been there for a couple of years, so I wanted to just enjoy the night. And then third goal was just set a mile PB in general. My mile PB was 6:23. I thought that was for sure going to get broken. So I get to the start line. We're doing our strides. I'm noticing that calf soreness. Uh, it was just a lot of people at the race too. That's the other thing is like it was just a lot of people. So anything you wanted to do, go to the bathroom, there's a line. Get water, there's a line. They also ran out of water. Fortunately, I was with my dad and he brought a bottle. I was with my dad and my brother. The thing is, and we realized in retrospect this was a bad decision. We all were running in different heats because we were each eligible for different heats based on our age and the times that we were going to run. So I was in this kind of like middle of the pack heat that all you had to do to qualify was be over 20 and run a sub 14 mile. So what did that mean? That like this was not the general heat, because there was like a general heat that would have walkers and people of all speeds. Um, so this heat would have at least people that were running. Like if you're gonna finish a mile in sub 14, you're at least running the mile. But sub 14 is not a high threshold, clearly. And that's it. My dad was in a heat with a higher threshold of the time you had to have to qualify, but also it was a master's heat, like it was for older people. And then my brother was in the kids heat. So anyway, we so we got to the start line, and we start. My brother goes off first. Uh, I go off after him. My dad goes off after him. And the problem is that when you're racing alone, it does make things harder because you're in your head. You have to pace yourself. If we had been we could have just gone in the general heat together, which one would have reduced the stress, because we would have been the first heat of the day. We would have been able to just like get out there and go for it. Um, Instead, my brother got to go early, but I had to wait like an extra 15, 20 minutes. And that also meant I cooled down. Like, because we had done the jog to warm up and we did strides, but then I was sitting in like the loading pen before they set us out for like 20 minutes, like at least 15 minutes. And I was boxed in by other people. So I couldn't stride. All I did was I just like occasionally every 2, 3 minutes would just jump up and down to try to stay warm. But my legs definitely stiffened up. I didn't have the speed in my legs. I didn't have that bounciness. And I could tell because the second the gun went off, I just didn't go off fast enough. In the miles, the kind of race that if you don't go off fast enough, you cannot make that time up. Like if you're just way below pace, and I was way below pace. I had my watch set to beep every quarter mile because it did have a clock there, but like it wasn't very accurate. Uh, the first quarter mile I did in 142 or something, or 140, like it was almost 145. That's to say I was 10 to 15 seconds behind pace in the first quarter mile. And that's it. Race is over. You really can't come back from that. Now, the reasoning behind that was the hill was in the first quarter mile. And on top of that, I got stuck kind of in the back of my heat because there were a lot of people. I came late to the pen to start the race, and they did my heat in two like waves because there's so many people. So there was the wave that went ahead of us, and then I was like right at the front of my wave. But the problem is like there were just a lot of people in front of me. This was a big race, so a lot of people weren't running that fast. Like this is a very general, lots of people come to this to just run, have a good time, which that's great. That's fantastic. But that meant that I was stuck behind people. Like most people in my heat were not running 6-minute miles. Because the thing is, if you did run a 6-minute mile, you qualified for a better heat. So that meant I was pretty much trying to run one of the fastest times out of anyone in my heat. And so I just got stuck behind people. And that was frustrating. Like I had to kind of swerve. I ended up going on the sidewalk for part of the first quarter mile just to get around people. I couldn't really use anyone as like okay, I'm going to focus on this guy and like pace off of him because everyone was going slower than me. Like I was passing people the entire race. Because like I just got into a weird, like not a great part of the pack. And I don't want to make excuses because really it was, I just came to the race and I was not prepared. That's plain and simple what happened. I started bad. I tried to speed up, but the second quarter, I actually slowed down a little bit. I think I also did like a 143, 144. And then the third quarter, I think it was 135. And then the final quarter, I did in 130. I got a good final sprint, but I finished in 6:34 was the final time. So I don't know if the math there, if the splits I've given you guys adds up, but final time was 6:34 officially. Disappointing for sure. I mean, there's not really another way I can describe that race because I did a month of training. Since the beginning of May, I'd been kind of looking at this goal of trying to get the 6-minute mile, and it finally looked like there was a date where it was possible. And every race I'd done, I'd improved. I started May 31st. I did a sub 7 mile, 6:55. A week later, I did a 6:40. A week later, I did a 6:23. So I was improving, and there had been a month since that 6:23 to now. So it just seemed logical. It's like I've done these hard workouts, I've done the easy mileage, I've done the long runs, I've done the tempos, I've done the strength work. So I am fitter than I was a month ago, quite a bit fitter, because even then I was still recovering fitness from my injury, from my time off. Like I was reaching pretty much the fittest I'd been in my entire life. And so I knew I was ready to show out. 6:34 is not the best mile I could have run. And I knew that because I got to the third quarter and I was just scared of the race hurting. And that's why I didn't go out fast enough. Like I knew physically my legs were not going at a fast enough speed. Part of it was they were dead because there had been a lot of time between the warm up and the start. Part of that was just I just started off kind of scared of the race. Like I knew that when I started out, if I'm gonna get my PBs, like the big goals I have for this summer, the sub 6 mile and the sub 24 5K, both of those races, on the day of the race, I need to set out and I need to attack the race. I need to attack the pace. And in a 5K, that's gonna be hard. I know it is. Like the sub 24, I'm just not sure how that's gonna get done. I'm gonna try my best, but you have to set out attacking the pace, being confident, and just going after it. And especially in the mile, I thought the mile I would be capable because I'm like the mile's short. The mile is only 4 quarters. It's 4 laps around the track plus a little bit more, 1,609 meters. Um, so I thought I need to set out and attack the pace, but it's just a combo of mentally my game was off. I'd had a bad workout before the race. I picked a bad race. That's the other thing. I picked poorly my A race. My race where I'm like, let's go for a PB. Because I picked number one a road race, which it's known you run slower on the road than you do on the track. Like if this same race had been my warm up and then immediately into the race had been, I get to pick when I start instead of waiting for someone to fire off a gun. It'd have been I had my spikes on a track. I have a good pacer, or even just I'm on my own with no pacer. I would have run faster than I did in that race. Um, like when I did the track meets that were in both of them, I set PBs. What helped was fast start that just gets you out of the out of the gate faster than you need to go because you're in a heat that's small and with people going your pace. Like when I was in my heat where I set my current PB, my 6:23, pretty much everyone in that heat was faster than me. So that meant that we set out from the gate. I remember it almost felt like a sprint for the first 100. And so then I was like, okay, let's settle down. Let's settle down into this pace. And also it was a pace that I felt confident in. And also it was a race where I have nothing to lose. This race was the opposite of I was, a little bit scared. I mean, I'm always scared before the races though. That's a good thing. It means you care. But I was like scared of the pace. I was scared of the pain instead of attacking it. And, once I got to the third quarter being like, this is where the pain starts. And that's a good thing because that means I'm reaching my potential. Instead, I ran, I'd say a relatively comfortable 6:34, which meant I did not get enough out of myself. To be fair, I did finish the race feeling pretty destroyed because I did a final sprint and that always takes it out of you. But up until that point, I knew I left the 30% in the tank of what I could have done, or at least 20% in the tank of what I could have done. So to be fair, if there is something good I can take out of this race, it's that I could not have run a comfortable 6:34 a month and a half ago or even a month ago. Like the fact that it did feel as comfortable as it did does speak well about my fitness. So that is a positive. However, we didn't accomplish the sub 6 mile, no PB, and to be honest, the race day, I mean, I enjoyed it all right, but there's just a lot of weird things about it. And of course, not getting my goal kind of bummed me out. I enjoyed it all right, I'll say, but I just picked poorly the race. I should not have come into it with the expectations. I think if I were to race that race again, like if I were to do it next year, I would not have in mind some time goal. I would just more I would race with my dad and my brother because I would have enjoyed it far more if we were, crossing the finish line together. Then, my brother raced, I met him at the finish line and then I waited for my dad and then I got to, watch him run, but it would have been fun. It would have been more fun to run together. Uh, so I don't know. That's kind of my takeaway. That's the Liberty Mile. That's America's Mile. So we didn't get there, and then I went to Alaska. In Alaska, it trained more than I expected. I did a couple runs while I was up there, just easy runs. Like, I was bored, and I just kind of got the inkling of like, hey, I should go for a run. Like, I wanted the trip to be a vacation from running, but I had brought my running shoes just in case, and I had one run planned. And then there are other days where I was like, you know what, I just feel like doing it. Like, I don't want to lose my fitness too much. I want to be able to hit the ground running when I'm back in Pittsburgh, and that's what I did. And now we get to the troubles a little bit. And also, we're going to talk about the future now. So, what were the troubles? So, when I was in Barrow, I decided to do a run from my hotel to this football field. That's the northernmost football field in the world, American football, I'm talking about, which is in Barrow, Alaska. It's like right on the Arctic Ocean. So, really cool place. As I said, I recorded part of the run, which I was going to upload for you guys, but just didn't turn out well, at least based on my personal viewing of the video. But yeah, so I ran from the hotel to the field and back, and I was not expecting to run as far as I did. My plan was I wanted to run at night in Barrow, because there they have sun 24 hours during the summer. They have sun the entire day because they're so far north that the sun just doesn't set. And then in the winter they have the reverse of they don't have any sun for about 2 months, or yeah, about 60 days is what I remember hearing. Um, anyway, so I had the idea that let me go out at night with the midnight sun because I'd heard that was super pretty. Problem, Barrow was super cloudy while we were there. The entire time we were there, it was very, very cloudy. Um, so, it is what it is. But I decided to go for the run anyways. Just enjoy the nighttime sun. Like, just enjoy the fact that you go out at 11 p.m. and there's sun. Like, that's pretty crazy. So, I did that. I started going out on the run, and I decided that I was going to go to. Well, first I just wanted to do a tour of the town, but I was like, let me go to somewhere. So I looked up this football field, and it was 3.4 miles from the hotel. And so I was like, all right, it's just on the border. I actually wanted to run all the way to Point Barrow, which is like the absolute northernmost point of the North American continent, or the American continent. But it was, like 8, almost 9 miles, I think, or maybe even 10. So I was like, nope. I'm obviously, because also be there and back. So I was like, 20 miles. I'm not running marathon today, guys. So let's do something closer. So I found this that was 3.5. And I was like, all right, that's just doable enough. Or 3.4. So I ran there, took some video, ran back, ended up being 7 miles. That is the longest run I've ever done. Never have done a longer run than that. The closest one I'd done was 6.67, if I remember correctly. And that was an A to B run. I ran from my house to the point in Pittsburgh. This one, it was obviously like an out and back. If I could have run to the field and then gotten like a bus back or something, I might have done that, to be honest. Like, I didn't really want to do a super, super long run, but I enjoyed it. I got to have some time with myself. There was the Arctic Ocean next to me the whole time, so that was cool. But what happens? So I did that run, and it was just long. And I remember I finished it. My left calf, which was the same calf that was hurting before the mile race, was sore. Here's the thing. It had been over a week and a half since that race. I had not run really that much in the interim. I'd run twice, and neither of them were particularly long runs. Um, so we'd had like a week and a half since the race, and then that same calf was hurting, and I was like, oh crap. But I figured with rest, this will go away. So I did rest. I was like, all right, now official moratorium on running for the remainder of the trip, which was like we had like a couple more days, and then between that and getting back to Pittsburgh, I was gonna have like 4 or 5 days with no running. And I was like, okay, this, should be good. Everything's going to heal up. I mean, 5 days, what doesn't heal in 5 days? That's not like a serious injury. Um, so we did that. I got back to Pittsburgh. I did my first run back, which was on, trying to remember, it was on Friday, I want to say. Yeah, because I got back Thursday. Yeah, so I ran on Friday. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I went for a run on Friday. And That ended up being just under 4 miles, and I did some strides. And my plan was the day after to do a tempo run, but the calf was started hurting at the beginning, but like it stopped hurting throughout the run. So I was like, okay, we're fine. I've had calf tightness and calf pain like that where it goes away once I warm up. So I was like, I was not worried. But then things happened that I finished the run, and I noticed the next day, or even just like that night, I was like, my calf hurts when I like walk on it. Like it was just like this deep ache like within the calf, which I've not had stuff like that. Like I've had tightness when I'm running, but now I've noticed like sometimes when I walk, or like if I try to even just lightly jog, I'll notice like a deep kind of pain, like an ache within the calf. And so I tried icing it. I tried heat. Um, and my policy with injuries is always baby them as much as possible. Like don't push things. I don't like to be someone who pushes things because you can turn a minor injury into a pretty major one by just being stupid and not taking basic precautionary measures. Um, but obviously you always have to balance that with the things you want to do. You have to take a calculated decision, calculated risk assessment. But I was like, you know what? Let me try to do this smartly. So instead of the tempo run, I did a swim on Saturday, and that went okay. We ended up only being able to do part of the workout. I went with my dad to do that. We only did part of it because the gym was shutting down. It closes early on Saturday, so that was part of it. Was Sunday. I was about to say Wednesday. Sunday, I took off, and then today I had another tempo workout planned and some S&C, some strength and conditioning. But I slept very poorly last night, and the calf was hurting more because when you don't sleep well, inflammation gets a lot worse. And just in general, I didn't feel great. I took a nap, but I got up and I was talking with my dad about it, and I was like, okay, let's not push things in terms of this calf with the tempo. And so I decided instead to do a swim again. That puts minimal stress on the calf. Um, Again, baby it, but do a tempo because we have a race coming up on Wednesday. And so that's what I decided to do. And I am going to race that race on Wednesday because so my calf feels like it's in the condition where I can run if I want to. It's just not the preferred, you know. Like it's the kind of thing where I feel like you give it a mile to jog and warm up, it'll feel fine. It's not like a sharp pain; it's more just like an aching. It is an indication of overuse. So I think I've been giving it days of resting it, foam rolling it, stretching it, heating ice, mainly ice, and then a little bit of heat. And even the swims I thought could be therapeutic because that's just getting the blood flow going throughout the body. But yeah, today I did a tempo swim because I wanted to get like a bit of a harder aerobic workout. That was also my dad's suggestion was like, if we're gonna do the race on Wednesday, do something today that gets a nice like a harder aerobic workout. Not don't get lactic acid in the muscles, but get a hard workout going so that way you're kind of more primed. I've had a hard workout before I just get into race conditions. Um, because otherwise they'd be quite the shock to the system. And I haven't done anything hard since Alaska, any hard workout since Alaska. I realize that that can sound a little weird if taken out of context. Um, anyway, so yeah, that was today. Because I did that tempo swim. It went well. Although I felt pain in the calf, even just like pushing off of the wall to do, at the end of each length, you push off to kind of start the next one. And yeah, I didn't feel great. So it wasn't bad, but it's just on occasion, just like this aching, and it's like, again, it's not bad. Like it's a 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, but it's just like an ache kind of deep within the muscle, and so it's like something has to be healed there. I'm giving it its time, but they're also I gotta push the issue eventually with running because I don't just want to turn into a swimmer. Although I do like swimming, I do enjoy it to an extent. But yeah, I can't just become a swim biker. Like I'm a triathlete, so you got to run too. Um, but yeah, I don't want to let that turn into something more serious because I do have goals for the future. So let's talk about those goals. What is the next month looking like? Just the future in general. So September 3rd, I'm leaving for college in Spain. So up until then is when I have plans to, when I have to, if I have any goals that I want to get accomplished before that, I have to do them before that date, before September 3rd. And of course, also I have to deal with a lot of parts of the visa paperwork and the payment to the college, and there's a bunch of things to work out. So before I even leave, the running can't be my number one priority because it has to be sorting out things for my future. So, what is going to be the deal with all of that? So, I still am chasing my two goals, my sub 6 mile and sub 24 5K. What are the adjustments? Well, one thing is that I've just had a lot of headaches about this, going back and forth because I started reading about, okay, peaking, can you re-peak? What's the best way to do it? What I realized was I probably ramped up a little too quickly because a lot of people recommend, you're starting a season, do more like if you're doing a season of races, basically you want to maintain just below your maximum kind of volume that you could sustain. And then as you're peaking for a race, you have about 4 or 5 weeks that you then ramp it up. You have more specified workouts, all that fun stuff. But aside from that, and also at that point, you lower your mileage so that way you can increase your intensity, prime yourself for that specific event that you want to race. However, I can't do that. Also, because like you want to have at other points, you want to be more focused on your aerobic. You're doing those easy miles and doing your tempos and things like that. And they say like when you're preparing for one specific race, like say a marathon, the way you structure a plan is you start with base training, which is aerobic and strength, and then you work up to some tempos and you do less strength work. And then when you're peaking for the race, you pretty much eliminate the strength work. You just do activation pretty much in terms of strength, and then you're starting to do real heavy speed work, and you get into your max, you cut down your mileage, and then you're working on more speed stuff. I guess not a marathon necessarily, because a marathon you do keep higher mileage, but like say like a mile or doing a 5K or a 10K, you cut down on the mileage and you do more speed stuff. That's the idea. So what happened? When I came back from injury, I started with base training, but that lasted about 3 weeks before I started doing tempo runs and harder workouts. And then I started racing. And so I started doing races like pretty much every week. So it was like a workout, a race, and then easy mileage cross training in between was kind of what I was doing with strength session. Well, it was 2 strength sessions for a while, and then it turned into 1 strength session and hill repeats. And anyway, and I kind of tried to peak for the race, that mile race that I told you guys about, the Liberty Mile or America's Mile. I feel almost obligated to say both names every time. I'm just going to call it the Liberty Mile because that is, when we talk about it within my family, that's what we call it. Anyway, so yeah, I tried to kind of peak for that race. I think I did it more or less well, but what I noticed was that my aerobic capacity was just not up to scratch. So what are we gonna do now? So I just need to get better aerobically, like anaerobically, speed wise, I'm good. In theory, to peak for a race, what you need to do is focus on the speed stuff. You're doing, your 400s, you're doing anaerobic reps, and so in theory, I want to at the end of August, in the beginning of September, do a 5K race and do a time trial for the mile. That's my plan. Is go on the track with spikes and do the mile, a true mile. So, the 1,609 miles on the track, the same track I did my time trial back in May. Actually, is the plan, and just do a time trial there and try to get the 6 minute mile. Maybe with some pacers, we'll see what we can manage, and maybe filmed. We shall see. But the plan is that, and I think that with I have about 5 weeks before that. With a proper 5 weeks of preparation, I should be good. And then I want to do a 5K. There's a 5K race I found, that's a road race, and because I do want to do it at a road race, I kind of prefer that, doing it in that race environment. And so it's on a flat course, and I want to do it there. And there I'm going to try for the sub 24-minute 5K. And those two things I'm going to do about, let's say, 3 to 4 days apart. Basically, I'm going to peak for both races. Kind of the way that, right now we're watching the Olympics. There are Olympians that have kind of peaked, and then they're doing a bunch of events at the Olympics with, a couple of recovery days in between. And that's kind of the principle I'm going to follow there is do one race, have, my short recovery, do some swimming, light activity, do a shakeout run for the next race, and then do the next race. Just kind of do my peaking like that. Anyway, so that's the plan. But yeah, as I was saying, so in theory, to peak for these two races that are now in 5 weeks, I would do speed work. That's what I was doing to peak for the last race. But I've noticed that my deficiencies are in my aerobic system because basically, especially my mile pace, I can't go to it for the mile distance without becoming too anaerobic to sustain it. So of course you can strengthen your aerobic system, but your anaerobic system, but part of it is your just aerobic system needs to be stronger. Your aerobic system has to be able to withstand that pace for just long enough that it is maintainable throughout the mile. And then of course your anaerobic system can do its part as well. The same goes for the 5K. Is that the pace is just slightly too anaerobic for me going 8 minute mile or 7:45 mile throughout an entire 5K is just a little too anaerobic because I did everything else correctly. I did my good pacing, good, negative splits, all that the last time I attempted a 24-minute 5K, and I was off by 38 seconds. So what does that indicate? We need to do easy mileage, long runs, swimming, right? But then also, good tempo runs. My intervals, I'm going to do intervals now that are not based on speed, but instead a combo of speed and aerobic. That's to say my interval workouts are going to get more complicated and maybe more brutal. We're going to see. Basically, I'm going to still do some intervals at mile pace, but then I'm also going to start incorporating kilometer repeats and 800s and other, pyramid workouts and things like that that work a bit more my aerobic system. Still at a high intensity, but work at keeping me aerobic and having aerobic strength and speed endurance because that's really what I'm lacking. And the 400s workout doesn't give you that. And you do need to work at like a high pace to be able to create speed endurance. So I need to work on my 5K pace, my lactate threshold, just below my kind of 5K pace at like a just uncomfortable speed. So that way, when I go to try to run that sub 6 mile, that is a maintainable pace for me. That is something that, it's not comfortable by any stretch of the imagination, but I can stay just aerobic enough that I can maintain those splits, that 130 split for every lap, and then have a final sprint to the finish to get me sub 6. And the same goes with the 5K, be able to maintain that pace and not what happened in the last 5K that I ran was I just ran the kick out of my legs. Like I had no sprint left at the end because I was just so tired and just having lactic acid building up in my legs. So the goal is work on the aerobic system, improve that so that I can get to those races stronger. And I'm doing the combo workouts because we're working with little time here. Because I think in theory the ideal would be I work on just working the aerobic system, do this kind of stuff, and then would have like an extra month after that to then work the speed aspect a little bit more, like sharpen those workouts and reduce the mileage. Instead, mileage is going to stay the same. I'm keeping it nice and low. Pretty much I'm going to do my long run, which is going to be 5 to 6 miles. I'm just going to keep it there. And then I'm going to do, my tempo runs. I'm going to do my swims. I think I'm going to swim quite a bit more. So fewer short, easy runs and more swims or bikes. And then, probably swims. I kind of prefer swims. And then do those interval sessions, but with some kilometer repeats, longer intervals at slower paces. And then racing. So I am going to race. We have those two races I mentioned at the end of the month, but then right now, it's July 30th, as I mentioned, or technically still July 29th, technically still Monday. I'm going to race on Wednesday a 3K, and that's kind of going to take the place of my interval session. It's on a cross country course, which is super cool. I'm going to get to be a cross country athlete again, and I'm just going to do that as kind of like a fun. I'm going to try to race it competitively, just trying to race people and beat people, but hopefully maintain a 7 minute mile pace more or less throughout. And that's going to be a good aerobic endurance workout. Also get to the anaerobic, also get to some speed, but I think a good aerobic workout. And then next week I'm doing a 5 miler, a race, which is there's this really cool course nearby that's by a lake that I think is going to be really interesting. So we're going to race around that, and I'm going to try to run that about on my lactate threshold as kind of like a tempo run. But also like I wanted to do a 10K. We don't have any 10Ks at good times for me right now while I'm going to be here. So I figured a 5 miler is pretty close. I won't have many other chances to do 5 milers either, so I think it'd be an interesting opportunity. And then when I'm back in Spain, do 10Ks there and whatnot. But anyway, that's the plan for the coming weeks. So 3K this week on Wednesday, 5 miler next week, mile time trial and 5K race at the end of the month. Training's going well. We're going to monitor the calf situation. I'm running out of time. I only have 5 seconds left because it ends at 45 minutes. So thanks y'all for watching, and I'll see you next